Hi everybody, thank you for watching my presentation today. My name is Ugahara bin Mahyuddin Yunus. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Modern Languages, University of Southampton. My presentation is about teacher identity construction of ACEHNESE English teachers in professional practice. This is the outlines of my presentation. There will be overview, setting of the research, rationale, my research questions, the theoretical frameworks that I use, methodology, the findings of the study, my conclusion, and lastly, contributions. Overview. Actually, if we can understand teacher identity, we can also understand how language teaching is played out by teachers in classroom. In other words, who teachers are influence the way they teach their students. Then, as we know, teachers are not always neutral in educational contexts. Of course, the way they teach is influenced by many factors, one of which is the culture that they adopt. Therefore, this research aims to look at the relationship between cultural identity and teacher identity of language teachers and how their cultural identity informs their teacher identity in language teaching. This is the setting of my research. My research was conducted in Aceh, one of the provinces in Indonesia. If you look at the map, Aceh is pointed by the arrow. I'm going to discuss the setting a little bit. Indonesia is a super diverse country. It has 34 provinces. There are 633 major ethnic groups among 1,331 ethnic groups as a whole. Interestingly, each ethnic group in Indonesia generally has its own indigenous language. Thus, it is estimated that there are more than 700 local languages spoken in the country. Lastly, Aceh itself has 12 ethnic groups, which each of them has its own language and culture as well. In short, I want to say that my research was conducted in a super diverse context. There are some reasons why I do this research. Firstly, it is because the research about how cultural identity informs teacher identity in language teaching in Indonesia is minimal, especially in multicultural setting. Then, as we know, teaching English also involves plural cultures in it. It doesn't only include the culture of British or American people, but also that of English teachers and learners. So it is very interesting if we explore how those plural cultures interact with teacher identity. Finally, Aceh itself is already complex with its multicultural environment. Within one place, Aceh, there are many different cultures and different ways of doing things. So it is also interesting to see how teacher identity is constructed in this kind of environment. Alright, research questions. There are two research questions. Firstly, what role do senior high school English teachers in Aceh construct as their teacher identity? The second question is, how does the role influence their teaching practice? Regarding the theoretical frameworks that I use, my conceptual frameworks of identity are sociocultural perspective and post-structuralist perspective. In sociocultural perspective, identity is constructed through social and cultural interactions. Surely, interaction is the right place to see how one constructs identity. Then, identity is referred to the network of social groups that one chooses. This means that if we want to understand the identity of someone, we can look at the social groups that he or she belongs to. Lastly, in this perspective, one defines who one is by the familiar and unfamiliar groups that one interacts with. This means that one's identity can be seen when one is different from others. With regard to a post-structuralist perspective, identity is something that is constructed, multiple, hybrid, and dynamic. Identity is not something innate, unitary, and stable. Also, in this perspective, identity construction is related to discursive practices. It means that identity construction is done in and through discourse. Here, people construct their identity based on existing authoritative discourse in society or by using situational or contextual discourse that they deal with. Lastly, identity is used to justify, explain, and make sense of who one is in relation to others. About teacher identity, here I try to give simple definition of teacher identity. Teacher identity can be understood as a mental image of a kind of person in which teaching is his or her profession. Based on previous studies, it is found that the nature of teacher identity is also the same as that of other identities. That is, teacher identity is multiple, shifting, in conflict. Teacher identity is influenced by other identities such as social, cultural, religious, and political identity. Then, teacher identity is also constructed, negotiated, and maintained through discourse. Now I'm going to tell you about the methodology. This study is qualitative study. I use purposive sampling because I choose my participants based on some criteria that they have, such as about their teaching period or experience of using English with native speakers of English. There are 4 English teachers as participants in my study. They are 2 female and 2 male teachers, and all of them are ACEHNESE people. With each participant, I conducted 4 times of semi-structured interview, 2 times of classroom observation, and I collected a 1,000-word teacher journal from them. This data collection took place for 3 months, and finally, all the data that I gained were analyzed by using thematic analysis. These are the findings of my study. In fact, all of my participants perform a moral guide role as their teacher identity, which is mainly based on Islamic values or teachings. As a result, this role certainly influences how they teach in classroom. Such as, while teaching English, they frequently give advices to their students regarding morality, build character in their students, and filtering out contradictory issues that they found in their lessons. This is the example of a quote about a moral guide role from one of my participants in interview. This quote shows clearly that this teacher wants to be a teacher because she wants to be a moral guide. The teacher said, "I think it is easy for us to invite people towards good deeds when we have a power. The power of teacher in our culture is strong. In ACEHNESE culture, the power of teacher is the third rank after that of parents. Indeed, it is strong so that teacher's voice will be heard. That's why finally I chose to become a teacher." In terms of advising students, the teachers always advise their students what proper behavior is based on Islamic values. For example, they teach their students to help others because in Islam, Muslims are required to help others. Then, another teacher made foreign people's behaviors that are in line with Islamic values as the examples of good behavior. Here, he mentioned maintaining cleanliness as the example to his students, in which cleanliness in overseas usually becomes something important in society. Lastly, another teacher used reading passages that give moral lessons to direct her students to good behavior. For example, when she found a text telling about the independence of Japanese kindergarten pupils, she used this story to tease her senior high school students who still relied on others much to do their own affairs. Regarding building character in students, interestingly, it is more important for the teachers to build character in students based on Islamic and moral values than to teach their students the knowledge of English grammar. Then, they also build character in students based on cultural concerns. For example, because in ACEHNESE culture, children are limited to give opinions by parents at home, the teachers built in their students' communicative character. The teachers trained the students to speak frankly and give their opinions in classroom. Finally, about filtering out contradictory issues, when the teachers found contradictory issues in their English lessons, they would filter them by telling how those issues are viewed in Islam. For example, when there was a text about Valentine's Day, the teachers reminded their students that this cultural celebration was forbidden in Islam. The students needed to learn the text just because the text would appear in the national exam. Here, the teachers are not only responsible to transfer English knowledge to their students, but also in fact to maintain the faith of their students in their teaching. My conclusion: the teacher identity of these ACEHNESE English teachers is mainly formed by Islamic values or teachings. They put themselves under teacher identity that has a role to perform, namely teacher as a moral guide. When performing the moral guide role, these teachers make morality as their importance and difference from other English teachers of other cultures. Contributions. Because religion in ELT literature is still limited, this research will give contribution to the development of perspectives in understanding religion in ELT. Then, to inform teacher educators about the importance of teacher identity in ELT, so that they can direct their prospective teachers to construct proper teacher identity. Lastly, in order policymakers can take into account what kinds of ELT practices appropriate for their English teachers' teacher identity. As a result, cultural conflicts that happen to English teachers can be solved or minimized. So, if you have any questions about anything in my presentation, you can email me to ubmy1g15@southern.ac.uk. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching.